So how do you actually control an empire that stretches across 3 continents, especially in an age way before any modern technology? Well, the Achaemenid Persian Empire didn't just conquer. They literally engineered a blueprint for how to be a superpower. And today, we're going to unpack that blueprint to see how they rose, how they ruled, and, believe it or not, how their legacy is still shaping our world.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with their absolutely explosive rise to power. Then, we'll dive into the brilliant engineering they used to manage the whole thing. We're going to meet the incredibly diverse peoples of the empire, explore their revolutionary policy of tolerance, and finally, we'll uncover why this great empire eventually fell.
All right, let's set the scene. We've got these Indo-Iranian peoples settling in what we now call Iran. For generations, they're living under the thumb of a bigger power, the Medes. But that was all about to change, thanks to one single visionary leader.
And I mean, the speed here is just staggering. In 559 BC, Cyrus the Great takes the throne. Just 6 years later, he's overthrown the Medes, and boom, the Achaemenid Empire is born. By 539 BC, he's conquered the legendary city of Babylon. His son Cambyses II keeps the momentum going and adds the ancient kingdom of Egypt to their territory. Think about that. In less than one lifetime, they went from being a subject kingdom to the world's first true superpower.
Okay, so conquering all that land, that's one thing. But actually ruling it, that's a whole different ballgame. And this is where the Persians proved they were true innovators. They went way beyond just brute force and started applying some brilliant political and economic engineering to hold their diverse lands together.
So after some chaos following the death of Cambyses, a new leader, Darius I, takes control. And he's got this huge problem on his hands. How can one guy possibly rule such a massive, sprawling empire? His solution was actually pretty clever. He divided it into 20 manageable provinces, which were known as satrapies.
So what exactly is a satrapy? Well, you can think of it like a state or a large province. Each one was run by a governor, the satrap. This was usually a Persian noble that the king trusted, and his job was to manage local affairs, collect taxes, and, keep the peace. It was this cool, decentralized system that allowed for local control, but made sure everyone stayed loyal to the king.
And this is where it gets really brilliant. The whole system had this amazing layer of checks and balances. Of course, the king had absolute power, but he had to keep his very powerful satraps in line. So what did he do? He created a role called the royal auditors, nicknamed the king's eyes and ears. These guys would just roam the empire and report directly back to him. It was a genius way to make sure no single governor got too powerful or challenged the throne.
Now, Darius knew he couldn't just rely on clever politics. To really cement his rule, he went a step further. He declared that his power came directly from the chief Persian god, Ahura Mazda. He had this message carved into the side of a mountain. Talk about a powerful piece of propaganda, claiming a divine right to rule. It was his way of telling any rivals, don't mess with me, God's on my side.
And with that authority, Darius went on an absolute tear with these incredible achievements. He was a master builder who totally understood that infrastructure is power. He beefed up the Royal Road, a highway that literally shrank the empire. A message that used to take months could now get there in mere days. He even ordered a massive canal built to connect the Nile to the Red Sea. And he expanded these incredible underground water tunnels called qanats to make the desert bloom. All of this just supercharged the economy.
So we've got this incredible political and economic machine. But who were the actual people making this machine run? Well, the Persian Empire was a total mosaic of different cultures and classes, and it was all organized into a pretty clear social hierarchy.
Right at the very top, of course, you've got the king, seen as the representative of the gods on earth. Just below him, you have the elite, so we're talking priests, nobles, and the top warriors. The middle class was made up of skilled people like artisans, merchants, and scribes. But the vast, vast majority of people were free peasants working the land. And then at the very bottom were enslaved individuals. Their numbers grew as the empire did, and they were often put to work on those huge farming and construction projects.
So how do you protect your spot at the top of that pyramid? Well, the king relied on a personal guard of 10,000 elite soldiers. And they had the coolest name. They were known as the Immortals. Why? Because their number was always constant. If one of them fell in battle, another soldier was immediately promoted to take his place. They were the ultimate symbol of the empire's unshakable military power.
Okay, this next part. This might just be the most mind-blowing thing about the Persian Empire. See, while they had their own powerful state religion, they didn't use it to force everyone to convert.
Instead, they used it as a foundation for a policy of incredible tolerance, and that was a huge reason they were able to keep their diverse empire so peaceful.
So the main religion in town was Zoroastrianism, founded by the prophet Zoroaster. It was centered on a main god, Ahura Mazda, but it was a complex worldview with a whole pantheon of deities. And get this, its core beliefs in a single creator, a cosmic struggle between good and evil, and a final judgment would go on to profoundly influence later religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
The core idea, and you gotta get this, is this epic cosmic battle between good and evil. On one side, you have Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom, representing truth and light. And his enemy is Achaemenid, the destructive spirit, who represents lies and darkness. Zoroastrians believed that every single choice a person made contributed to this huge struggle, and that a final judgment was waiting for everyone at the end of time.
And this is where we get to that paradox I mentioned. The Persian kings were devout Zoroastrians. They truly believed their right to rule came from Ahura Mazda, and yet they almost never forced their religion onto the people they conquered. This created something pretty unique, an empire that was guided by one faith but was built on a foundation of religious freedom for everybody else. And look, this wasn't just some nice idea they talked about, they actually put it into practice. When Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, he did something famous. He freed the exiled Judeans and allowed them to go home and rebuild their temple. Across the empire, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, dozens of other groups, they were all allowed to keep their own gods and their own customs. For the Persian kings, the math was simple. Loyalty and taxes were way more valuable and forcing everyone to be the same.
But as we all know, even the greatest, most sophisticated empires, well, they don't last forever. After 2 centuries of being on top of the world, a series of external conflicts and internal weaknesses started to pull at the threads of the Persian state, leading to its eventual and pretty dramatic collapse.
The first real crack started to show during the Greco-Persian Wars. A shocking defeat at Marathon in 490 BC, followed by a huge naval loss at Salamis, basically stopped their westward expansion in its tracks. Now, the empire was still a superpower for another 150 years, but these losses proved they weren't invincible. Then in 334 BC, the final challenge arrived. A brilliant and incredibly ambitious Macedonian king named Alexander the Great. And the final kind of tragic nail in the coffin, it didn't even come from the foreign conquerors. It came from within. The last Persian king, Darius III, was murdered by one of his own satraps while he was trying to flee from Alexander's army. The very system of provincial governors that was designed to hold the empire together was what ultimately helped tear it apart.
So, the Achaemenid Empire fell. It was conquered. But its ideas, they didn't. That blueprint for governance, decentralized rule, massive infrastructure projects, and strategic tolerance, it became a model that other empires would look to for the next 2,000 years. Which leaves us with a pretty big question. Did the Persian model for empire ever really vanish, or do we still see its echoes in the world powers of today?